Yesterday, our Friday farm report began on a Thursday as we went through the Mets' first 7 selections of this year's draft. Today, I'm once again joined by Jordan Grossman as we talk a little bit more about the draft. We go through the Kumar Rocker selection by the Rangers, 3rd overall a year after the Mets drafted him and did not sign him. We talk a little bit of Juan Soto in this podcast, had to get Jordan's take. And then, of course, to close out the show, a series preview of what lies ahead against the San Diego Padres. All of that in this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Friday Farm Report is a 2-parter this week. If you didn't tune into yesterday's show, I had Jordan Grossman on. He's with me again, our social media coordinator and Locked On Mets draft expert, as I am not one. Of course, this is Ryan Finkelstein, the host of Locked On Mets. And yesterday we went through the first 7 selections the Mets made. Really excited about all the talent that came in, so make sure you check that out. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the draft with Jordan today and also get into series preview and even maybe a little bit of Juan Soto talk. Let me get another take on this one, especially someone who's so invested in the Mets farm system, see how far Jordan would go to get a deal done. But looking at the overall draft the Mets had here, I saw it was an MLB Pipeline said they had the most talent that they brought in of any organization. It seems like, again, we'll find out in 3 years, the Mets really did have an amazing draft here.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that when you have the number 11 and number 14 picks in the draft. And, when you have two picks in the top out of the first round, you should be right at the top in terms of rankings for overall draft class. But I think the Mets did a really good job. They targeted a lot of up the middle talent early in the first 6-7 rounds, which is always a good thing to see because those guys are always going to be versatile. You can move them around shortstop, second base, center field. They can move around if they have to. And yeah, it's just, Parada, like I said yesterday, really, really surprised that he ended up at number 11, but very happy that he was the pick. I think people are going to have a lot of fun watching him, mostly because he has a very funny setup. For those watching on YouTube, I think he pulls the bat like all the way back down to his lower back, his elbows all the way up in the air like this, and then he just comes down and just sends the ball 450 feet, and it's pretty funny. I'm not going to say it's Kevin Youkilis-like, but the setup is similar where he just holds his elbow way up in the air, and it's pretty fun to watch.
I'm kind of thinking of Gary Sheffield. I don't know
that was everyone's in Little League. That's what they would try to imitate during. At least that was my whole team. We all just did the Sheffield stance.
There was 2 for me. It was Sheffield, and then when Ichiro came up, everyone tried the running swing without much success because only one guy can really do that. Actually, the second guy is Jeff McNeil. Kind of has a little bit of a run to his swing sometimes also. But we just mentioned the fact the Mets had those 2 picks early on, and there's a reason they did because Kumar Rocker was the Mets' first-round pick last year. I think if people want to go all the way back in the files, you and me did a podcast raving about the Kumar Rocker selection, and then we're very upset when the Mets did not sign him. Now he goes 3rd overall, if I'm not mistaken, right? Genius move, honestly, by Chris Young. Basically, underslot him a bunch. Who was the other pick? Is it Porter?
They got Brock Porter in the 4th round to pick 109. Yep.
And both got Boris clients. So, I mean, that's kind of like a package deal. I wonder if that was something that Boris was shopping the teams, knowing how he operates.
Yeah, so there were rumors.
Right?
There were rumors for, I think, 2 days that the Rangers were trying to angle to get Porter in the 4th round. Just that's the reason they went I think they went $2 million underslot for Rocker, which they were able to do because the Kumar Rocker rule now is that if you submit your medicals at the pre-draft combine, you have to be offered 75% of your slot bonus. But the Rangers didn't have to do that because Kumar Rocker didn't submit all his medicals. Okay. So they were able to just massively underslot him at pick number 3 and then able to get, still have a bunch of pool money left over and get someone like Brock Porter, who's arguably the top prep pitcher in his class in the 4th round, similar to what the Mets did with Matt Allen back in 2019.
Yeah, a genius move by them. And obviously the big question for Rocker is going to be the health, but assuming the Rangers are happy with his medicals and he's able to pitch for them. I mean, you could see him in the big leagues really soon. And I think that's going to hurt Mets fans a lot. Just knowing that, like, this year, theoretically, had Kumar Rocker been healthy, he could have been pitching out of your bullpen. Like that could have happened. So what's kind of, how are you going to be following Kumar Rocker's career now that he's no longer any tied to the Mets, but always will have been first selected by them in the 2021 draft? What year are we in, dude? I don't even remember anymore.
COVID throws everybody's timeline off. Listen, I'm very happy for Kumar that he was able to, bounce back from this and make it all the way up to the 3rd overall pick. Maybe not for talent, like I said, but it's more for the money reasons that he was picked that high, but still, very impressive for him. I don't have any harsh feelings towards him. It's more Scott Boras that I have harsh feeling towards, because what happened was, and I know a lot of people have followed this over the year, but I'll just, bring it back up, is that the Mets weren't happy with the medicals that Kumar Rocker brought to them while they were going through the process of signing him, or at least negotiations to sign him. And it went really poorly. I don't even think the Mets and Rocker's camp talked for the last 2 or 3 days before the deadline. He went and got shoulder surgery, I think 2 months after, in September, and didn't pitch for almost a full year before he went to indie ball. He pitched for the Tri-City Valley Cats, was up to 99. I know teams liked him. I didn't think they liked him this much. I know on my personal board, he was 22nd, I believe, for this year. So big surprise. I mean, obviously it'll be easier to root for him now that he's, not in the Mets division at all. He's not, he didn't go to the Phillies or anything, which I know they were rumored to be interested in him this year. He's in the he's playing with the Rangers, so they're not really going to be playing the Mets too much. But for me as a draft nerd, it's fun to see Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter back together. They're going to be in the same system, so that's going to be kind of cool. But yeah, more just angered towards Boras than I am towards Kumar.
And the bottom line is, through all of it, the Mets decided that getting the pick this year was more valuable than signing a guy where they didn't like his medicals and the amount of money they'd have to spend to sign him. It just made more sense for them to get the pick. Which pick was it? Was it 11 or 14?
So the number 11 pick was the Kumar Rocker comp pick.
Okay, so you got Kevin Parada out of him. And right now, if I ask you, Jordan, who would you rather have in the Mets system, Kevin Parada or Kumar Rocker? What's your answer?
I think right now, when you look at what happened with Rocker's shoulder, because shoulder injuries always scare the crap out of me, I think I'd say Parada.
And that's it. Bottom line. I mean, that is exactly what the Mets did here. And look, you're looking at the farm system, and we'll see how these guys' careers end up panning out. But this is, a situation where you have to trust the Mets. And I know that as Mets fans, that sentence might send chills down your spine if you've been paying attention for depending on how long you've been suffering as a Mets fan. But I think this is a franchise that you can maybe start to trust in some of these situations. But will they? Oh, you got something else before I go?
No. So I just wanted to, say it again, is that shoulders really, really scare me. The shoulder injury that Kumar had, even there was rumors about, partially torn UCL, which I don't really, that's not a big deal. So many guys ended up getting Tommy John surgery and they're just fine. So that's not the part that scares me. I think it's more the shoulder, is that they didn't like what they saw clearly in the MRI and in the imaging afterwards. So if the Mets felt that he wasn't worth it at all to even offer a contract, I have to trust him here. And I think Kevin Parada and Jet Williams is, a really nice compensation.
It is for sure. And speaking of partially torn UCLs, I think it was maybe 2 summers ago where I was at a Mets Royals game and I tried to throw the speedometer there and try to see how hard I could throw. And I might have partially torn my UCL throwing 55. When we come back in just a minute, I got to get Jordan's take on Juan Soto because I just can't stop talking about this. And then we'll close out the show with the series preview. All right, Jordan. Right now, I got Rizzo on the phone with the Nationals. You're Billy Epler. He says it's going to take Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio. Let's see who else. We're throwing Brett Beatty in the package also. We're making this as steep as possible. Alex Ramirez, David Peterson, and Dominic Hamill. A 6-for-1 deal, but you get Juan Soto right now for a playoff push, and you also get to hang on to Mark Vientos in that trade. Are you doing it?
Done. It's already done. It's Juan Soto. I talked with you about this the other day. This is a generational talent. This 23 years old, he's already at 21 wins above replacement. He's a lock for Cooperstown. This is a guy that I think you mentioned on the podcast the other day. If you trade for him, he's going to go into the Hall of Fame with a Mets cap on. Just lock it down because Steve Cohen is going to give him that extension. He's not giving up all those prospects just for 2.5 years. It's going to be a massive 10, 12-year extension that's going to keep him here for the rest of his career in a Mets uniform, or at least the rest of his prime. This is a guy that you reset the farm for. He is a game-changing bat. I think he's at a 960 career OPS, something like that. This is a lot of people consider it a down year for him, and he's at a 162 OPS plus, which is just incredible. I mean, you see the numbers that he put up in 2020, 2021. This is a guy, like I said, you reset the farm for him. This is a guy you go all out to add, even if you have to take on Patrick Corbin's contract. I would do that in a heartbeat. This is a guy that you go all out for.
Yeah, and I actually wrote an article for Just Baseball that went up on Wednesday. And basically the article is simply titled, "Should the Mets trade Francisco Alvarez for Juan Soto?" And I went through it, and I think that it's a really tough conversation to have, because the more I write about Francisco Alvarez and go through it, and I say, okay, well, this guy's only 20. Juan Soto debuted at 19. I'm like, well, like who's to say that in 3 years Francisco Alvarez doesn't have a 162 OPS plus at the break in a down year, because that's how good he could be. And it gets me on, like, man, do you do it? Do you move him? And I think also in the article I wrote, this is the best prospect the Mets have had in Alvarez since Darryl Strawberry. I mean, like, a better prospect than David Wright was. And David Wright was an incredible prospect. But we're talking about someone who I really do believe by season's end, most outlets might have him as the best prospect in all of baseball. So the idea of trading Alvarez for Soto stings so much. But then I go back to the fact that, as you mentioned, the OPS plus, I was looking at the article at WRC plus, a 152 WRC plus, even in a quote unquote down year, he'd be the best off. He's having a better offensive season than anyone in the Mets lineup, including Pete Alonso. He already has 20 home runs, just 4 less than Alonso. He's getting on base at a 405 clip. Alonso gets on base at a 339 clip. That kind of explains the discrepancy in WRC plus. I think Alonso at 139. You just got to do it. If you have an opportunity to put Juan Soto in the middle of your lineup for a playoff push, plus 13, 14 years after this as well, to be the building block, you figure it out. And so, yeah, I've already mentioned the Kevin Parada draft pick has nothing to do with Francisco Alvarez's trade availability. Like, it's not linked, but it is linked in the sense that you're going to have to start focusing on the next crop of prospects that are coming in. And you just hope that you just did hit a home run on this draft, because this draft becomes that much more important if you do make this trade. But like you mentioned, Patrick Corbin, I do think there is a world where the Mets might be able to hang on to Francisco Alvarez in this. Now, it's going to take everything else. But if they are that dead set on we can't move Alvarez, maybe you can get it done. And I also think if you take on Corbin, the big positive here is if you take that contract on, I do believe you keep either Beatty or Alvarez. Just a matter of which one. But I think that and also the Nationals might be sold too. So who knows what their motivations are? I mean, they might just want to be as cheap as possible for the next 2 years before they sell and get out of town. And they might not really care about who the prospect return is as much. Obviously, they're going to do their due diligence, but you know what I'm saying here. So I think this is something that we have to continue to talk about. And yeah, you make this move, man. You just have to, right?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, are you taking on Strasburg too? I personally wouldn't, but it's something that people have brought up. I mean, that's maybe the worst contract in baseball, but it's something that people have considered. But yeah, the Lerner family just wants to get rid of as much money as possible before they put the team up for sale. And I think, people talk so much about, the Mets won't trade with the Nationals because the Nats won't send him to the NL East. They don't want to face him for the next 10 years, whatever it is. I don't think that's true. I think if the Mets present the best offer, and if they offer to take some bad money off the Nationals' hands too, it makes the most sense for them. It's what they should do. If they don't do it, they're hurting themselves as a franchise. If they're offering you Francisco Alvarez, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, you have to do that if the other offers aren't as good. Because if you believe in those guys more than you believe in what the Dodgers or the Yankees are offering, it doesn't matter. Those are the guys you have to go after as a franchise. Mike Rizzo as a GM, he's trying to protect his job. I know the Lerner family is trying to get out of baseball, but I'm sure Mike Rizzo would like to stick around even if it's not with the Nationals. So he has to make the best deal possible. And yeah, I talk so much about prospect hugging. I've come on here and talk about how much I hated the Kelenic deal, even with how great Edwin Diaz has been. What they did there, but this is different. This is a 23-year-old who's under team control for 2.5 years and is arguably the best hitter in baseball, and hasn't even hit his prime for another 2 years. So this is someone who's going to have protection now if you add him to the Mets lineup. Like you said, with Pete Alonso, with Francisco Lindor, with Jeff McNeil, he's finally going to have protection now, which he doesn't have in Washington. This may be why he's not getting the numbers that so many people think he can get to, and maybe in terms of just batting average. He's hitting 250 this year. He can get up to be a 300 hitter if he has those guys protecting him instead of just maybe Josh Bell and Cesar Hernandez and D. Strange Gordon and Maikel Franco. Those aren't guys you really want protecting you. If you add him, this is the best lineup in baseball. This is the number one contender in the NL for a World Series, and could be for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
And I mean, you talk too about the batting average. Like last year, he got on base at a 465 clip for a full season. And you're talking about almost 1 in every 2 at bats. Juan Soto is getting on base. That's incredible. And yeah, this year he only has like 43 RBIs because he's playing on a team where there's not a lot of guys on base. You look at Francisco Lindor and you look at their swing profiles and every metric you want to look at, there is not anyone that is telling you that Francisco Lindor is a better hitter than Juan Soto. But he's on the Mets right now with Starling Marte and Brandon Nimmo hitting in front of him, getting on base a ton, scoring runs, and he's now got 20 plus more RBIs than Soto. So yeah, you just imagine the fact that Lindor becomes probably your 5th hitter. McNeil's batting 6th. That top 6 of your lineup, if it's Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Lindor, McNeil, I don't care who the last 3 are. And then also, I do think that you can maybe, it depends on what you want. But if this is all about win now, very easily, I think you can get a trade done without Mark Vientos included. And you might have a chance to have him as your DH as well in the second half of this season. And that makes this lineup that much better. I think in that circumstance, I don't know how they work it out to get Escobar out of the lineup, but I think you're going to see a lot less of Eduardo Escobar. You might see some less of Mark Canha, but you're going to be seeing a lot more home runs and more runs put on the board with Soto in the lineup. And again, potentially even still keeping a Mark Vientos.
Yeah, I mean, Vientos, and obviously you could also use him in other trades. So you need to add to the bullpen, or you decide you want to add another 5th starter. He's a guy that you can, you got to keep some prospects in the system, even though I know I just said I want to dump everybody for Juan Soto. You got to keep some valuable guys in there. And if you're able to keep a Mark Vientos, a Ronnie Mauricio, Dominic Hamill, and Matt Allen, you can use those guys in other trades that just really boost your odds to make it out of the NL and to face whoever, in the World Series.
And I think that the obvious trade that I'm going through this a lot, I'm thinking about it more and more. Let's bring Wilmer Flores back. Come on, for the vibes. If you get Juan Soto, bring Flores back for the vibes.
For the culture.
God, it would be great. I mean, let's just get him a ring, Flores deserves it.
Especially after being that last guy to strike out in 2015. That image is burned in my brain forever.
Yeah, was it Ty Kelly got the last hit? Or no, that's 2016. That's 2016.
No, I'm talking about 2015. Yeah, him striking out against.
No, I know you're talking 2015. I was just remembering like Ty Kelly always.
Last postseason hit. Yep.
That's what it is. It's the last postseason hit for the Mets from the 2016. Yep. Yeah, that team was so fun.
But we don't count 2016 as like a playoff. It was one game. So you only count playoffs if you get to the division series.
Well, now you got a wild card round, right? You got 3 games, so I guess those stats start to count a little bit. But speaking of 3 games, the Mets have 3 against the Padres this weekend. Getting back to some actual baseball, I've missed it, so we're going to talk about that in just a minute here. All right, 3-game series against the San Diego Padres at Citi Field. Unfortunately, Jacob deGrom will not make his triumphant return just yet. I know everyone's panicking. I know it sucks. He had a little bit of, I know, as soon as I even start to mention it, if a Mets fan has not heard this yet, a little bit of soreness in his shoulder on Sunday. He has thrown multiple times since then, has felt good, but in the Mets' words, out of abundance of caution, they pushed his rehab outing from Wednesday to Thursday. We're recording this before that outing has taken place, so don't know how that went. Assuming that goes well, maybe you see him at some point at the end of next week. Like we always said, they could play this really cautious because their rotation has been so good. They have 5 quality starters right now since Scherzer returned. And although the Mets have not announced their starters, we imagine Scherzer will take the ball first. He's going to be going up against Yu Darvish. And you're facing, obviously, a team off the break. All the best pitchers. It'll be Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove going for the Pods. This is going to be a tough series, but a fun one.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely going to be a tough series. You're facing the 3 best starters coming out of the break. Snell, obviously, he has those control issues. Darvish, I know Mets fans are still mad at him for what happened with Pete Alonso getting hit in the hand. And, his control wasn't great in that game, but he's still a really, really good starter. But I think the Mets will be able to come out of the break with a win when you have a guy like Mad Max on the mound. I think that should be not an easy game 1 victory, but I think people should expect a win.
Expect to win there. You got, probably, we don't know yet, but maybe Taijuan Walker going one of those games. I imagine Chris Bassett in the other. You probably then have Carlos Carrasco and maybe David Peterson pitching against the Yankees in that next series. But the Mets are kind of an interesting spot here because they come out of the break and they have an off day on Monday and they have an off day on Thursday too. So this is, I think, a really good thing for this Mets team. I just watched them a bunch out in Chicago, and it kind of did look like a team that was just – like, get us to this freaking break, man. I mean, the offense, they erupted in game 1 and, just crashed down to earth. So I think this is good for them to have had all this rest. Obviously, the All-Stars didn't, but Starling Marte didn't play in the game. Pete Alonso had an early exit in the Derby, saved maybe a little bit of bullets there. I think that this was good for the Mets, good for someone like Francisco Lindor to just get away and spend time with the family and kind of gear up for a second half. Someone like Eduardo Escobar needed a break, needed to kind of stop the grind for a little bit, refresh. I think this is going to be really good for this Mets team to maybe get back to where they were offensively. And the pitching, obviously, we haven't really had to see too much to be worried about there. But then your bullpen gets a rest too. I think that all that is good for this Mets team. And now you're looking at probably 10 games maybe before the deadline. And I think that they're sitting at this spot here where you go up against the Braves in that series to win that one series and then to match them in that 4-game set heading into the break. You're sitting, 2.5 games up, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep, 2.5.
Over Atlanta still. It's going to be a look. If you're a Mets fan, if they end up losing this division to the Braves, there is no shame in that. That Braves team is awesome. Not to give them too much credit here, but that lineup is really good. They've had incredible rookie performances from Michael Harris, and you have William Contreras and Spencer Strider joining a core that got Acuna back and then also won a World Series last year. That's a good team. It's going to be a race down the wire. I still think it's Dodgers, Mets, and Braves as the 3 teams that are kind of atop of this league. The Padres are like a tier below, in my opinion, but that's still a team you can face off in the playoffs. So this will be a good first series out of the break. Then you get a little Subway series, and then they're going to be coming to my neck of the woods in Miami. So a good week of Mets baseball ahead. That's going to be all, though, for Locked On Mets this week. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Jordan's doing great stuff with us over on Twitter at Locked On Mets. You can follow me at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making this your first listen every day. For your second listen, we talked a little draft today. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia. He has you covered with everything that happened there and all the other future stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get podcasts.